Hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. And this is our 350th episode, so if you've been listening from the very beginning, thank you so much. This podcast is the thing I enjoy doing the most, and it's given me an entirely new perspective on not just what I do, but on what makes people love art and make their own. And to mark the occasion, I thought we'd do something a little different. My guest this week is Cameron Gibson, who's one of the lead magicians at Jamie Allen's Illusionarium, a new experiential magic exhibit that offers an immersive journey through the evolution of magic using 3D projections, lifelike holograms, and live magicians, all in a socially distanced setting. It opens in the Toronto Star Building at 1 Yonge Street this Thursday, July 29th. Cameron picked The Prestige, Christopher Nolan's 2006 tale of two magicians, played by Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, whose partnership turns to rivalry after a tragic accident, leaving them determined to outdo one another's greatest accomplishments at any cost. Made on the heels of Nolan's Batman Begins with much of the same creative team, it's a lavish costume drama that now plays like a prophecy for the rest of Nolan's career. I think I mean that in a good way. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Cool. So The Prestige, I am actually a professional magician. My name's Cameron Gibson. I'm a professional magician. So I thought, what better movie to talk about on a podcast about movies than a movie about magic? So yeah, simple as that, really.
Yeah. But is it magic? Is it science? It's the back and forth throughout the whole movie that I think is the reason people still, love it so much, is that it's Christopher Nolan doing his cold cerebral thing, but wrapping it in a story where you really are encouraged to wonder over and over and over again what exactly is going on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think the kind of parallels with magic and the science themes that go throughout it, and also the magic and cinema as well, have a kind of rich history with each other. I think it's David Devant, who was like the creator of the Magic Circle in London, was one of the kind of pioneers of early cinema, and he created a lot of film technology and that kind of thing. So yeah, I just think this movie is a great mixture of all those things in one lovely package, wrapped up with Christopher Nolan's bow on top. So yeah.
When did you first see it? What was your first encounter with it?
So I was probably a little young to see it in the cinema. I didn't see it in the cinema. I think I got into magic when I was about 18 or 19. So most people get into magic when they're kids. But when I was about 18 or 19, that's when I really started this love of magic. And at that time, I remember just trying to find everything I could about magicians, whether it was books or TV shows or movies. And at the time, there wasn't too many movies about magic out there. It wasn't very cool when I first started it. It's kind of become a little bit more cool in the past few years, I think. And I think The Prestige has a role to play in that. I think it came out around about the same time as, is it The Illusionist? They were released within weeks of each other. It was very confusing. Yeah, okay. So I'd imagine there was some little rivalry there and some rumors about why that was the case. But yeah, of the two, Prestige is definitely my favorite, I have to say.
Yeah, it's had more staying power, I think. The problem with The Illusionist is that it really does just settle for a big bait and switch. And
yeah, absolutely.
There's not. It's funny. I remember at the time thinking that The Prestige was the weaker of the two because I figured it out and it annoyed me. Like yeah. Well, mostly I figured out. I mean, obviously, what is it? A 15-year-old movie? We can spoil it a little bit.
Sure, of course.
I very quickly figured out, because the movie does sort of lampshade it, that there are two Christian Bales, that's his act. And the bigger surprise is obviously what's going on with Jackman's character. The story of two Alfred Bordens and one Robert Angier, and they have to fight for primacy in the magical world. And it became very clear to me very quickly that Nolan was hiding the other Borden, that Alfred's brother was being obscured to us. Yeah. And so there's only one answer for that. Plus, they lampshaded early on with the thing about the birds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the very opening scene actually is the birds, and Michael Caine's character Cutter literally almost explains the plot of the film in the first 3 minutes. Which, I mean, I didn't catch the plot twist until it hit me, obviously. So that plot twist, if you don't see it coming, hits you like a ton of bricks. But yeah, and then rewatching it again, I did the other day. It's amazing that there's just so much foreshadowing through it, and I almost feel like, how did I not How did I not see it coming?
Yeah. And it's the best thing about the film now is that it doesn't matter. You can still enjoy it knowing what's going on, which is the thing that I love about Nolan's films, is that they welcome you into their, maybe not the later ones, but they welcome you into their process. I can still watch Inception and look at the construction of a given scene. And it doesn't really, like, the whole point of that movie is that it doesn't matter what's going on as long as you keep the momentum up.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of Chris Nolan films, is that they're amazing pieces of filmography and well created, but he keeps them nice and, generally speaking, accessible for people. So anyone can watch it. You can watch it loads of times. And actually, this time when I watched this film for this podcast, because I was watching it with a bit more of a critical eye, there was things I've seen this film probably 10, 12 times at least. And there's things I picked up this time that I'd never picked up before, which is a sign of a well layered movie, I think.
Yeah. Well, you got to tell me what are the things? What did you notice?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, and I actually, in all fairness, I've read a little theory about this before I watched the film, but there is a theory that, because we can talk about the cast in a second, because it is an incredible cast as well. Sure. But there's a theory that Nikola Tesla, who in the movie is played by David Bowie, which again is an amazing casting.
Yeah.
How'd you get David Bowie to play Nikola Tesla? But
I think actually I think it happened because, if I remember correctly, Nolan said that no one else could do it, that he was only ever considering Bowie because he wanted a delicate ethereality, I think is how he put it. Like somebody, it's mostly because of The Man Who Fell to Earth, which was a movie that impressed him a lot. He just wanted someone who you would believe was in touch with something that no one else could see.
Yeah, he has this like weird charisma, and it's like there's something, it's like he knows something that you don't. But so he plays Tesla in the movie, and then Andy Serkis plays Tesla's right-hand man. His name escapes me. I think it's Ali. I think it's called. And there's a theory that actually Andy Serkis is Nikola Tesla, and that they have this act going on as well, and that David Bowie is his front in the same way as each of the magicians at various points throughout the movie have a double or someone that stands in for them. Yeah. If you watch this movie with that theory in mind, it does hold up, and it holds up remarkably well, because when anything goes wrong with any of the technology, it's Andy Serkis who fixes it, not Tesla. Andy Serkis leads them out of the room. He explains a lot of the stuff, and he's the one that travels around the country to go to the expos and demonstrate the technology. Yeah. So I enjoyed that little kind of side note.
Yeah, well, there's nothing in the movie to disprove it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, yeah, I mean, it doesn't make too much of a difference to the movie whether it's true or not. But a little bit of a fan theory, I guess.
Yeah, well, and it stands to reason too that no magician or scientist is ever seen alone, right? They always have someone to bounce exposition off of, or someone to interact with in a given scene. And I suppose a movie where somebody just sits and tinkers at a bench would be boring, but yeah, it's Watson and
Alexander Graham Bell.
Thank you. Yeah, that's
a fun one. Canadian people, for some reason, claim that as a Canadian invention.
Oh yeah, it's very important to us, but it was Scottish sort of, I know, it was a shared thing.
I know. We'll share it.
It was a long distance call. I accept that. but it's also something that is very, very specifically Victorian, right? Like the idea of gentlemen working together in a room to create the miracle, which is what The Prestige is all about. It's everyone's immaculately dressed except for Alfred Borden, who's a little scrappy. His brother seems even worse. Yes. And there's just this constant sense of him needing to prove himself to the point of mania. And that was the other thing that worked against it for me the first time through, is the idea that to make this work, they would have had to be doing this since they were 5. Like the idea that one of them has no life or is completely subject to whatever else is going on in the world, it's absolutely illogical, but it's also the kind of Dickensian flourish that you would buy in that era. It works for the time. And it took me a couple of viewings to really get my head around that. It's that, yes, of course it wouldn't work now, but 100 odd years ago, you could probably, at least in a narrative, you could sell that. You could make somebody accept this.
Yeah, and I mean, in the history of magic as well, I mean, the whole movie stands up to the kind of history and the how things were actually done back then. And there's some incredible stories in the history of magic, which kind of are true stories about the lengths that people go to make things happen and make magic tricks real and amazing. And you know, there's people who lived whole fake lives as different races, actually, in order to make themselves seem more mysterious, and like they had these kind of powers back then. So it really is a good reflection of the history of magic, and I think that theme in the movie there about how far will someone go to make something work is a really fun one for me, because as a professional magician, I know, like, never underestimate a magician. I've known people that will go to a venue that they're doing a show at, like a week before. They'll stick something to the roof as like a guest, and then they've planned it a week in advance just so they can have that one moment of magic where like the playing card appears on the roof or something. So yeah, I mean, it's a fun one for me as well, definitely.
Yeah, there's that theater kid energy, right? Where no matter what it is, it's worth it if it works.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, it's just a movie that sparks the inner child in me from start to finish, and very relatable for a magician.
Well, I mean, I hesitate to spoil the ending of the film, even though it's fairly well known, but it is an absolutely horrific image that everyone is fine with. I mean, I remember the audience applauding, and it's like, no, guys, no, that's horrible. He's doing this to himself over and over and over again. Yeah,
the final frame of the film is kind of harrowing.
Yeah, but of course, that's the beauty of Nolan. Like, he always knows how to go out. He always leaves you on a high, no matter what you're seeing. And you have the payoff to the entire Angier story, which is that he is a pretender. He's perceived as somebody who just, you know, takes credit for looking the part rather than actually performing and putting the work in. But of course, he's doing far more to himself than anyone else can realize.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it seems like it comes from a place of kind of selfishness within them as well. It's not like they actually don't care, I think, in the movie what the audience thinks, which is what you'd think that would be the end goal of any performer, is to amaze the audience. But because of this rivalry and the length they go to, it seems by the end of it they don't actually really care what people think of the show. It's just what people think of him.
Angier is actually going to greater lengths than Borden ultimately, because, you know, Borden just does it once. Ultimately, you can only it's the old Warner Brothers cartoon trick, right? Like the biggest magical explosion, and the punchline is, but I can only do it once. And Angier found a way around it.
I mean, the two characters of Angiers and Borden really embody those two kind of sides of performing. I think you've got the person that puts in all the work and the effort, but maybe doesn't have that stage presence and that flamboyance, as you say. And then you've got Jackman's character, who is, until towards the end of the film, doesn't work as hard or as fast, but has that ability to entertain. And yeah, I guess he gives up a bit of that showmanship for method by the end of it, and it gets a little dark towards the end as well, right?
Oh, it absolutely gets dark, but it's a really fascinating commentary now to me, 15 years later, on where those actors ended up, because Bale embraces his self-serious. I've met them both over the years. Bale is one of those guys who is absolutely open to talk about stuff unless he thinks you're not taking him seriously, and then he gets very, very quickly offended. But you know, the whole thing with the eye line and the cinematographer, that's kind of why he's perfect for Borden. And Jackman is a song and dance man. Like, Jackman is just a born crowd pleaser, and it's not that he's superficial, but he can turn on a superficiality, and Bale just doesn't have that. It comes out as sarcastic. And so now watching the movie, it's just like, no, those guys are perfectly cast, and Nolan saw something in each of them at that point in their careers that would work.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because as you say, Christian Bale has a lot of the same characteristics, and then you look at Jackman now and like The Greatest Showman a few years ago. There's a few scenes within The Prestige which really are the same sort of imagery of The Greatest Showman. You know, on stage with the arms kind of spread. So yeah, I think I do agree. I think they're perfectly cast for the roles, and the whole cast is way better than I remember it being from the last time I watched it. I kept seeing people that I was like, oh, I didn't know that, like, Scarlett Johansson was in this, and David Bowie,
Rebecca Hall,
all the way to Ricky Jay, and Rebecca Hall, absolutely. So Ricky Jay, the magician they both work for at the beginning of the film, he's a real life magician. He passed away a few years ago, but magician and actor. So
getting him was like a benediction, I think, for anybody working in this genre.
Yeah, it's a really nice kind of cameo for me to see, because I think when I probably last saw the film, I wouldn't have been as familiar with Ricky Jay as, certainly not as a magician, maybe more so as an actor. But seeing him in the movie, it's just like, oh my goodness, it's Ricky Jay, an actual magician in there as well. It's a little meta, I guess.
Yeah, I think
the whole
so.
film's quite meta, actually.
I think so. Yeah, it's a nod towards everything that's going on too. The sense of just opening with Kane's voice asking us if we're watching closely, and then proceeding to dazzle the camera with everything he can throw at it because he wants us not to watch that closely. It's actually, it's not. I mean, sorry, I was going to say it's one of Nolan's most complicated films. It's not, because once you factor in the Batman sequels, those things are gargantuan machines, or Tenet, where he's creating new technology in order to pull off the stuff he wants to do. But The Prestige is the one that keeps talking over itself, that it's, I think, trying to distract the audience with the dialogue and the personal situations, even though ultimately it's a really straight line narratively. It's, I don't know if it was his first film where he didn't play with time, but it's certainly one of the few where it progresses in a straight line. One
of my favorite films, at all, is Memento, another obviously Chris Nolan film, and that is massively plays with time. The scenes alternate and they meet in the middle, and I love that concept. But I think it's fairly linear in The Prestige, but there is moments where they jump back into memories and back and forwards, and he does that quite unapologetically in this as well. I don't think he ever uses there's no dream sequence kind of fade out. It's just kind of straight cuts, which lets you kind of piece it together yourself. I think it lets you work out the puzzle yourself, rather than just being handed to you on a plate. Which I think is one of the other things that people love about Chris Nolan movies, generally speaking, is that they get to work out themselves. It's not just handed to them, and you have to watch it, you have to engage with it, and you have to kind of get involved with the movie as well. And yeah, he sort of he reveals information when he needs to, and I think it's an interesting progression from Memento, which I think was the first of the kind of these types of films that he's made. Then this, and then Inception came afterwards, and yeah, similar kind of themes there in the way that he reveals the story, I think, and the way that he layers things, and that's what I'm all about. And I also think actually the structure of The Prestige, I think it's been compared loads of times to the same structure as any movie. Sorry, the structure of a magic trick is the same as the structure of the movie, where he talks about it as the pledge, the turn, and the prestige, being sort of like the setup, the conflict, and then the resolution. So that comparison's been made quite a lot, but I think the way that the plot twist happens as well is really comparable to the way that us magicians construct magic tricks. He relies on your assumptions the whole way through. Like, you assume that maybe there's only one Christian Bale because you have no reason to suspect otherwise. You assume a whole bunch of things along the way, and then he uses those assumptions you've made yourself to then can hit you with the plot twist, which is exactly how I would construct a magic trick from scratch. I think it's amazing in that sense.
Yeah, I'm thinking now about the process of building a trick. So what is that process for you specifically? I mean, how do you decide where you're going, or is the prestige the thing that you start with? Like, what is?
You absolutely do. Yeah. So that's the way that I do. You start with, what do I want to achieve? If magic really existed, what would I do? And maybe it's you make someone appear, or you make something disappear, or whatever the trick is. So you start off with that concept, and then you kind of work backwards. So you work out. I mean, it's also a side note, the pledge, turn, and prestige are not terms that are used within magic at all. They may have been back then. I actually don't know. I maybe should have Googled it, but
right.
But they don't. They're, I'm fairly certain, kind of fabrications for this film, but from the book I think they got adapted from, I'm sure. But yeah, you start with the prestige, the ending, and then you work backwards, and you try to work out how you could do it, and then you work out a bunch of methods. And actually, in Illusionarium, we reference this process, and we call it the magic maze. And the idea is that at the center of the maze is the effect, the thing that you want to achieve, the secret, if you will. And your audience are walking around the maze, and they're trying to get to the middle, to that secret, the thing that's guarded. And it's the magician's job to close all the doors on the way. So if you think of how to make something float, for example, then someone might think, oh, there's a wire that does it. So the magician has to prove there's not a wire. You close that avenue, and then they go, oh, maybe it's, I don't know, like magnets or something. So you have to prove that there's nothing attached to it. And yeah, so that's sort of the process we go through. It's challenging and fun and frustrating, but when you get there eventually, it's one of the most satisfying things in the world, to be able to say you kind of managed to pull that off.
I'm just trying so hard not to ask questions about the process of creating things, because I know that would ruin it, and I don't want to ruin things for people.
No, I mean, hey, a lot of it's built on, based on our knowledge and experience. So you learn tricks that other people have done and techniques. And after a few years of learning magic, you really learn a way of thinking that is, I think, is different to most people. You learn how to play with people's assumptions and how to get around them as well. And I mean, I don't love this term, but a lot of people refer it to it as kind of hacking your brain, or hacking the human brain, because you're finding the shortcuts and the ways around the way that you believe the world works. And yeah, and I guess it's interesting that you mentioned earlier the science and magic kind of pairing within this movie, because it's, again, something that I'm close to. I love science. I've got a degree in engineering, so science and magic have always been really, really closely tied in terms of how to make things work. Really famous quote in magic that gets used by every magician in the world at some point, from Arthur C. Clarke, who said that any sufficiently advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. So anything that we can't explain, we just say it's magic, right? And that's how it's been in all of history. And yeah, I guess that links back to, segues nicely into the film.
Well, yeah, I mean, Tesla is, I think, shorthand for the guy who was streets ahead of everybody else, just, a universe ahead of everyone else. And there's another film called The Current War, which involves Tesla fairly recently, and is not nearly as satisfying, because it's just about the fight over AC and DC, basically, and how George Westinghouse and Thomas Edison were at odds over that. And when Tesla is invoked, it's just one of those things where, oh, that guy's weird. Like he doesn't fit into science as far as the movie is concerned. It can't even quantify him, but Nolan is using him as a signifier of the Clarke motto, that the idea that no, he can explain everything, we just can't understand it.
Yeah.
And the beauty of magic is that we want not to understand it. That's the thing that Nolan is interacting with in the script, the basic human need to be staggered, that we want to be surprised. It's why things go viral. It's why rumors become fact over time. It's the birth of urban legends. Some part of us still wants to believe that there are things that happen because we don't understand them. And there's a group of people who want that to prove, a structure to the universe that allows these things to happen. Then if you understand, how do they put it in Doctor Strange? It's a great line. If you know the source code, you can manipulate reality around you. And then there are those of us who are just like, oh, wow, that's really skillful that you pulled that off. And I don't know how you did it, but I assume you know. So I'm not saying you must be magic. I'm saying you must be really talented. And the Prestige kind of walks the line back and forth between the two.
Definitely. And I think on that, like, every time you hear magic and cinema compared, in terms of the way that it makes you feel, I've heard the terms, in cinema, you have the willing suspension of disbelief. So you sit there in the cinema, it's a show, that it's a movie and it's special effects and everything, but you still go along with the ride. You're not sitting there going, Iron Man can't actually fly.
Right.
But with magic, we employ the unwilling suspension of disbelief. Because you sit down at the show and you still know it's a show, but you can see it right there with your own two eyes, and we're explaining it, or you think we're explaining it in full, and it still happens the way it does. And yeah, I think throughout this movie, there's really that that feeling. And there's a really subtle line towards the maybe like the third act of the movie, and it's when Michael Caine, I think, and Hugh Jackman are talking to the theater owner, and they show him the trick, Nikola Tesla's trick, for the first time, and he says something like, "You need to dress it up a little bit, or else people will be like scared." I can't remember the exact line, but it's basically he kind of hints at the fact that he knows that it's real and that it's science, but other people aren't ready for it almost. And yeah, I enjoyed that little line.
Yeah, disguise the truth just enough that it isn't terrifying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just crying and screaming if you knew what was actually happening.
Yeah. Well, and that goes to the concept of performance, right? And to be a public performer of magic. What do you do? What's your preferred mode of presentation?
Yeah, so my background is generally speaking, I back home I used to perform what's called mentalism, which is it's also known as psychological mind reading. So you basically use psychology, statistics, a whole bunch of other things to make it seem like you can read people's minds. Now I kind of cornered myself in that little area because if you mix that with traditional magic, it loses credibility, right? If you say you can read someone's mind and then you do, and then you show them a card trick, then they just go, okay, well, the other thing was a trick. And it is a trick, but I don't want it to feel like a trick. That being said, I have a fairly large breadth of knowledge in all areas of magic because I just love it. I don't really perform all areas of magic, but that's what led me to this job here in Illusionarium, because we have so much, like we have every type of magic here, from massive Las Vegas stage illusions type things. We have close-up magic. We have classical magic. I think the one thing we are missing is mind reading, funnily enough. But unfortunately, with COVID, it's really difficult to present things like that because you need people to be close.
Oh, sure. Facial cues alone, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's been one of the biggest challenges with this whole project, actually, is working out how to... The whole thing's been designed around COVID and making it COVID safe. So it's been very difficult to present magic. When we first were going to open, we weren't even allowed to speak on stage. And so the whole thing is done to a soundtrack with voiceovers, and the performers still wear masks and don't open their mouths once, which is an amazing challenge. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, it'd be amazing. I can actually see that being even more sort of eerie and disturbing if things are happening at a remove that way.
Yeah, definitely. And it's let us show people magic so up close. It's like you see some stuff here, like I'm still amazed by it, that you would never see, probably never, you'd struggle to see in a theater, but here you can see it like feet away, like 6 feet, 6 feet away. But yeah, and funnily enough, there's a few things that are in the Prestige that we have here. I'm not really supposed to talk about it, but yeah. So it's nice to see. It was funny to see that in cinema, and then come into work today and see it in real life. And we present it slightly differently. But yeah.
Oh, now I really want to know.
Yeah. Well, let's just say it involves a lot of water.
Okay.
That if you've seen the Prestige, then you know what's up. But yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. The other thing about the Prestige, I think that distinguishes it from other magic films, not just The Illusionist, but that little wave that was happening, things like Now You See Me, where it takes the work absolutely seriously while still letting us enjoy the theatricality of it. So much of Now You See Me is about people tricking each other from scene to scene to scene, and it's not a bad thing, but there's not a lot of dramatic momentum. And so much of The Illusionist is about Edward Norton staring very intently at things and moving his fingers just a tiny bit, so you feel that he's conjuring, and it's exhausting. But The Prestige finds a way to frame a film where very little actually happens as a swift, involving adventure. I mean, it does have that vaguely exotic Victorian aspect to it that is always so hard to capture on film.
Yeah, 100%. I think I mean, Now You See Me is not a bad film at all. I really enjoy it. It did a lot for magic when it came out. But I agree, it's a little bit too much, I think, at times, and The Illusionist maybe not enough. And The Prestige does fits quite in the middle of the two, I think, and it hits you with enough kind of conflict, and the whole thing is basically just a big fight between two or three magicians. But
yeah. Well, and
yes,
I think
what was the second part of that?
Oh, just it's got that Victorian excitement, like the sense that you're watching something, and we talked about this earlier in the podcast, but the sense that you're watching something that is just potentially supernatural, just a little bit magical, that it's just beyond the veil of understanding, which was that whole thing that was going on with Conan Doyle at the time, where only one person can see the truth, and it wasn't just in his home stuff. He was interested in debunking mysticism and the supernatural where he could. And I think part of that fascination comes from the fact that he really wanted to be unable to debunk something. We're all chasing that same thing, the impossible.
Oh, that's why I became a magician, right? I've got this logical mind as an engineer, and I saw a magic trick, and I had to know how it worked. And then you learn loads, and the unfortunate thing for magicians is that the more you learn, the less often you can be amazed, because you know how it's done. So one of the most amazing feelings in the world for me is to be truly fooled by a magic trick. If I see something I don't know how it's done, I never want to know how it's done anymore. Don't tell me. I'll beg you, but don't tell me under any circumstances. And yeah, the time setting of The Prestige, that theme was massively was relevant, because you had a massive amount of spiritualism back then, and people kind of masquerading as having these spiritual abilities and powers. And I think, again, linking back to the science and magic thing, a big part of that is because there was so much technological advancement around that time that there was almost, I think there's a line in the film that actually says this, where they say basically that people weren't ready for it. Things were moving too fast. Mm-hmm. And so when you saw something amazing and new, like a light bulb for the first time, they're a wizard. They're not a scientist. They're a wizard. And I actually think Michael Caine says that in the film as well. He says, "Oh no, this trick wasn't made by a magician. This was made by a real wizard," or something like that.
Yeah, and again, if you want someone to deliver that line, Michael Caine is your guy. He's just,
of course. If I deliver it, it sounds like I'm working at a kid's party.
It's that weird little gravitas, the thing he does with his voice that no other human being can do. He can just drop it down like a quarter octave, and all of a sudden, it's the most grave and important thing he's ever said. That's a magic trick in itself. And I think that's the other thing too that I like about The Prestige. You get to watch all the actors go through their boxes and show you what they can do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's I think the casting in it is next to impeccable. I couldn't see it being done by anyone else. And yeah, Michael Caine. I mean, is there a bad Michael Caine film, or is there a bad movie with Michael Caine in it?
There are bad movies with Michael Caine in them, but Michael Caine is never bad in them. Okay, that's the thing to remember.
Okay.
I've seen The Swarm. Trust me on this. It happened.
I'm not.
Jaws the Revenge. Dear God.
Jaws the Revenge. I didn't even know that existed.
Oh, Jaws the Revenge. The only fun story that came out of Jaws the Revenge is that he was not able to attend the Oscars the year he won for Hannah and Her Sisters, because he was shooting Jaws the Revenge. And there's one scene in the film where he's just whacking this big fake shark. And I keep thinking, that's the next day. Like, that's the day.
He found out he won, and then he realized what project he was on. And
he's venting. Yeah. Like this one moment. Although he's also very famously said he's never seen the film, but he has seen the house it paid for.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
So again, when you're Michael Caine, you can do stuff like that.
Yeah, of course.
But Piper Perabo and Rebecca Hall and Scarlett Johansson, Nolan's not always great with women's roles for most of his bigger pictures. But I think there is definitely a sense of what's being lost in those performances, that the chance for relationships is being pushed aside, or that, human connection is being overlooked by our heroes in order to pursue their dreams. And in those three performances, maybe not so much Perabo because she gets to have a little more fun, but in Hall and Johansson, we really do see that there's an empathy there for the people who are being hurt by this.
Oh, 100%. You really get behind the female characters in this, and you really care about them by the end of it, and you can really empathize with their points of view, and especially Hall's character. I think when she keeps saying things like, "Oh, today you love me," or "Today you don't," there's kind of like especially when you know the plot twist, there's a little bit of kind of heartache in there because you're like, oh, like, and you see in Christian Bale as well, his reaction to when she says that he acts it amazingly. He kind of, depending on which Christian Bale it is,
right,
reacts kind of accordingly. And actually, I did when I was watching it, I was interested in the female roles because I know Nolan's not, as you said, not renowned for his casting of female roles. And again, in this, they are very much supporting characters, but it was an unfortunate fact of the time, and unfortunately still is today, a fact that's how traditional magic was presented. You know, it was the assistant got on the box, and it was always a slim, attractive woman, which was back then for methodical purposes more than anything else. The theory being that women tend to be smaller and can get into smaller spaces, and were used as misdirection.
Yeah.
Thankfully, today the magic world, in the past, I would say 5 years, we're still a bit behind the rest of the world, unfortunately. But we're really trying to smash that stereotype and get rid of it completely. And we have, here, for example, we have a team of, I think, our at best guess, I would say 45% of the cast here are female magicians and female performers, and that's amazing because, yeah, I mean, I want to inspire everyone to get into magic and pick up a deck of cards. But yeah, it's something the film doesn't do amazingly well, but it does reflect the time period, so I think it can be forgiven.
You know, unfortunately, The Prestige is about male ego. So it has to be two men at war. I mean, everyone around them is collateral damage, which is why you cast strong actresses to balance that. But it has to be between the 2 or 3 men who are competing with one another, because that's how society viewed those opportunities at the time. Yeah.
No, it's and yeah, as you say, the whole film is based around that battle of ego, and yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what else I was going for there, but yeah, Johansson is there to puncture it more than anything else, and I think she does that very well. And Hall is there to show us the psychological toll, and she does that very well.
Yeah, I mean, so Johansson leaves in the end, and the Hall, spoilers, she dies as well, and yeah, I guess I think they do a great job of really allowing the audience to feel that the weight of the decisions that these male characters have made, and the lengths they've gone for their art, and it doesn't just affect them, but it affects everyone around them, sometimes irreversibly.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that Nolan is limited in the ways he can write women, but I don't think he's as dismissive of them as his reputation these days. And The Prestige is a pretty good argument for, look, no, he thinks this stuff through. It's like arguing that Michael Mann doesn't write roles for women, which, you know, that's true because he doesn't, he like actively excludes them. But the female characters of The Prestige are as involved as it's possible for them to be given the setup. So yeah, I mean, again, this is 2 white guys talking about it right now, but it seems to build a world that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the world makes sense for the time period, especially, and is, although it's a little bit kind of otherworldly at times, especially with the Tesla stuff, it's very much grounded in reality, from start to finish, I think. And there's loads of things within the film that keep it nice and grounded, I think, because I think there could have been a danger with this film for it to become a little like a little too much and a little unbelievable. And I think a really good job was done of just making sure that the unbelievable stuff and the stuff where you have to sort of willingly suspend your disbelief to get on board with is kept quite slim and quite minimal, because otherwise, if you get too magic-y, I think, because ultimately it's not a film about wizards or it's not a Harry Potter film. It's a film about people who use normal methods that every human being can do to perform magic on stage. So I think they ground it really well. The one that kind of stands out to me is the court scenes, and obviously the whole thing is narrated from court, and that's like very reminiscent of real life magicians as well. You know, we struggle with legal proceedings around our craft or art because it's all about secrets, and as soon as you go to court, you have to tell them everything in order to prove stuff, right?
Yeah.
And there was, Copperfield a few years ago was taken to court by an audience member for an injury, and it resulted in him having to reveal a massive portion of his show to the public. Teller from Penn and Teller took another magician to court over one of his acts, which another magician stole, basically, and again had to reveal how that worked. Magicians can't have patents. We can't trademark things because in order to get all of these things, you have to write down how it works. So there's loads of scenes within the movie that really do kind of ground it in reality, and I think that is. I think it's really important for a movie like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about magic in terms of the occult or the supernatural. It is like the genius of it is that it's a science fiction film, but you can never tell anybody that. The audience is implicated in that as well. If you go out and start telling people what it is, it's less good. Like you just don't want to ruin the experience for people.
No, 100%. I mean, as I say, I didn't see the plot twist coming, so it hit me like a brick wall. Yeah,
that's good. The trick worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's the magic of it, right? And I think the whole thing feels like a one big magic trick from start to finish. And yeah, it worked. It works on me. Fooled me.
That's great. It's kind of weird because we've sort of discussed it already, but is there anything of the Prestige that made it into the Illusionarium? And are you in fact at liberty to talk about that if there's such a thing?
Yeah, so they're
just in terms of inspiration more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think so. So we Illusionarium, we have a bunch of rooms that takes you through the history of magic, right from the kind of first known magic venue, the Palais Royal in Paris, France, and then it takes you all the way up to the future and of magic. And within that, it was remarkable actually watching this film back after having helped produce this project, because at every single point in Illusionarium, there is massive kind of references to stuff that is discussed within the Prestige. The second room is modeled after the Egyptian Hall, which was known as England's home of mystery. So it was in London, England, in the 1800s, and that's like very much a Victorian magician. So the magician that performs in there is in a top hat and tails. It's all very kind of classical magic. We have a room that is a secret, technically, but that has a key piece of apparatus from the Prestige in it, and you get to see that live. There is then our final room is called Evolution, and it's all about the present day up to the future of magic, and that's all about the marrying of magic and technology, and how we use like cutting edge laser technology. We have like 180-degree LED screens, and the whole act from start to finish really fuses magic and technology together. And there's parts of it which kind of ask you to kind of decide where on the spectrum between magic and technology the trick actually lies. So yeah, the themes in the Prestige are all the way through Illusionarium. It was actually, kind of remarkable. How much so?
I guess it's just the stuff that works, right? It doesn't go away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the stuff, and it's the history. It's the truth at the end of the day. I think is it Carl Germain once said that a magician is actually the only honest profession, because a magician will tell you that he's going to lie to you, and then he does. But yeah, people love to hear the history of it, and they love to hear the truth as well. And we do tell the truth, but we play with it a little bit, we embellish it, let's say, with a bit of magic.
I like that. Last question. Are you more of an Angier or a Borden?
Oh, I would say that I'm maybe a little bit more of an Angier. I'm more of a thinker, I think. I'm not a natural born performer. I had to work hard to get up on stage and be able to do it. It didn't come naturally to me at all, but the logical thinking and the kind of hard work and the finding out how to do things, that did come quite naturally to me. So I'd say more of an Angiers.
Yeah.
That's Bale, right? Angiers is Bale's character.
No, he's Borden is Bale.
Oh.
He's Jackman.
Oh, well, strike that, reverse it. Borden. Yeah, of course. Sorry.
That's okay. But Borden is so humorless that I don't see him in you. Like, it's just like you're already much more lighter and natural.
Yeah, I mean, naturally? I think the reality of performing and performing magic is that if you want to be good at it, there is two sides of there is the Borden side and the Algiers side that kind of have to come together. Unless someone else makes your tricks for you, which is the case for some magicians. They have like I think they have a cutter, a Michael Caine, and I think in the movie they call him the ingénieur. But largely, magicians come up with their own tricks, and they maybe have a small creative team that help. But you really need to be able to do both to be a performing magician. And you get magicians that are just that. They just make tricks and create tricks for other people. But I'm not one of those. I'm more of a performer for sure. But yeah, but as I say, it didn't come naturally to me. You know, I was never that confident at high school. I was never into theater or anything like that. I was always massively into movies and into cinema. But I couldn't get up in front of a crowd of people and speak. So I really forced myself into this personality, I think, which is interesting in itself, because I guess there's a little bit of not falsity to it, because it's, you know, it's real. This is me, but it's not me naturally. And I guess there's a little bit of magic to that as well. A little bit of not like deception, something a little bit behind the curtain when it comes to my my ability to perform as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think everybody's stage persona is an enhancement in some way. I've never met anyone who's exactly the same as they are. Yeah.
And I guess you see that in this film is a great example where they're all playing a part, right, at all times. Doesn't matter whether they're on stage or they're at home with their partners and their kids. Every character in this or every magician character in this is always playing a role. And there's some truth to that when it comes to me as a person as well. Definitely, I'll happily admit that. But I'll deny it if you ask me in person.
My thanks to Cameron Gibson, whose work will be on display from an appropriate distance at Jamie Allen's Illusionarium at the Toronto Star Building as of this Thursday, July 29th. You can book tickets at illusionarium.ca. Thanks also to Suzanne Sheridan. She knows what she did. You can find Cameron on Twitter at CGibsonIRL, all one word, and you can find The Prestige on 4K, Blu-ray, and DVD from Buena Vista Home Entertainment. It's also available on Apple TV and Google Play, and streaming in 4K on Disney+. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I'm hosting a bunch of podcasts these days and writing the weekly Now streaming newsletter, to which you can subscribe at nowtoronto.substack.com. And you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or the show, please say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're there, like The Reheat, a brand new series in which Sadaf Hassan, who I worked with at Now, and Sarah Sahagian revisit the pop culture stories of the early 2000s from a present-day perspective. It's fun. Stay home, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get your shot if you can. And really, thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.